You don't need hundreds of fragrances. You don't. How's it going, Royal fam? All my loyal subscribers. I know statistically about 80% of you aren't subscribers, so if you like fragrances and you like talk about men's cologne more particularly, go ahead and subscribe to J-ROYL, the best smelling channel on YouTube. Now normally I like to do fragrance reviews, first impressions, scent of the weeks, and most importantly, Top 6 Sunday. But if you've watched my channel for a long time, you know I did a lot of talky videos about the subject of fragrances, and more specifically, fragrance collecting. I've been a fragrance collector for years now, and I have gone through some evolutions and changes, and my perspective on it has changed a little bit. So if you'll indulge me, let me vent a little bit, let me rant a bit, and hopefully maybe you can pick something up from this video and perhaps avoid some of the mistakes that I made along the way. With fragrance collecting, there are definitely different tiers, different levels of how knee-deep you're into this thing. To a lot of people, you may have one fragrance that you wear occasionally, or maybe a handful that you rotate through. And then there's others that have one for every day of the year. I've definitely been guilty of that in the past. I've had way more fragrances that I even could comprehend wearing and getting around to, but that's kind of the nature of collecting. It's acquiring new things and having them to sort of hashtag flex and get your drip on. It's a little bit like shoes, right? If you are a crazy shoe collector and have hundreds of pairs of shoes, it's great, but there's only so many days throughout the year that you can wear them. And a lot of times, most of those shoes probably won't even get worn. The same goes with fragrances. At my collection's highest point, I think it was probably around the 300 mark of fragrances, maybe mid twos. And while it felt really good to open up my closet or my wine cooler and look at them, I wasn't really using them. And that was a big problem for me. This leads me to the whole concept of fragrance addiction. Instead of appreciating the actual fragrance, you're just appreciating the process of acquiring those fragrances, getting them, maybe getting one sniff and then putting it away and then just being happy to know that you have it. The danger here is fragrances can be extremely expensive, especially if you're paying retail price, which I never recommend. There's so many gray market websites like fragrancebuy.ca, or in my case, I got a lot of my fragrances on Facebook, secondhand. But even then, especially with niche fragrances, you would probably be spending at least $100 per bottle. And when you do the math of the fragrances that I had, that's a lot of money. I've taken this term and given it a fancy little acronym called CAS. Not gas, CAS. Cologne Acquisition Syndrome. This is a disease that affects a lot of us watching. Essentially, no matter how big your collection is, your first thought would always be, well, it could be bigger, you know? I'm missing a few mid-May fragrances that are also smoky. And what you have here is a perpetual cycle of buying fragrances, but the more you buy, the less you can really enjoy them. If you have over 365 fragrances in your collection, which some of you do, that means in order to go through your collection, you can only wear one fragrance per day. And the thing is, you really want to wear a fragrance more than one time in a year, because it'll give you a much better interpretation of how that fragrance actually smells. Because it may perform and smell a bit different on one day compared to the next, which is also kind of why I like my scent of the week videos, because at least you got a week, right? So we know, okay, crazy spending on a hobby is your choice, but objectively speaking, are your priorities really in check? That's not for me to decide. What I can say, and what has worked for me in the past, is you can make a few little changes to your collection, but still have just as much variety as you want, and you still feel like you're a collector, which is important to a lot of people. If you're at the point now where you feel like your spending habits are getting a little out of control, or you've already amassed this giant collection and you have some regrets, the simple answer is just start selling some of them. If it's hard to figure out which ones are worth selling and which ones are worth keeping, look at the level of the liquid inside. If it's pretty much a brand new bottle and you got it 2 years ago, you're not wearing it, so why are you keeping it? This also goes to the people that have a ton of backup bottles. If you've gotten a bunch of backup bottles for a discontinued fragrance, That's fine. If you got them because you're scared that your favorite fragrance is going to get discontinued, you don't need them until that announcement comes, and then maybe you can stock up. But if all your backups are 100% full, you're not wearing it, so why are you keeping it? What I had to do with my collection is I took a really deep look at all my fragrances, and I just said, okay, objectively, as objective as I can be, if this fragrance was gone tomorrow, would I be emo? Would I cry? And if I said no, then okay, gone. And you may have noticed on Facebook and all that, I have sold a lot of my fragrances. I still have a lot. I still have a lot more than I should, but I've made a huge dent in my collection. What I love about where I'm at with my collecting is I've sort of adopted a Netflix or subscription type of model with how I collect. No, I'm not using Scentbird where I get an actual subscription and I get a little sprayer every month. No, I like full bottles, right? So what I've been doing is whenever I buy a fragrance, I try and get rid of one of the other fragrances in my collection that I'm not wearing anymore or that are completely redundant. So the quantity remains the same. I have this little wine cooler that has a very confined space, and I don't want to surpass that. I don't want to have to put fragrances on top of it. I don't want to get a little side shelf. No, that is it. That compartment is all I can have. And when I'm going through my fragrances, I'm like, I haven't worn this in a couple months. See you later. I'll sell it. 9 times out of 10, it'll be on Facebook groups. I really recommend it, but do it at your own risk. Or even on Kijiji or Craigslist or whatever let go sort of service you have. It's been great. And I also got to meet a lot of the community as well, which is a huge plus too. So my collection has life. It's breathing. It's ever changing. It's a rotation. It's a big rotation of my collection that's constantly being refined and etched out into my ideal fragrances. Don't feel like you have to hoard and keep everything, right? Keep the fragrances you're actually using. Don't get backups of a fragrance that you have a full bottle of. Like Manny from Cascade Scent says, wear your fragrances. That's why you bought them, not to just look at them. And then of course, if you don't really care about presentation and bottles, then there's always decants. Decants are like the not so secret ultimate life hack of fragrance collecting, because you can have 1,000 fragrances at a fraction of the price because you're getting a much smaller quantity in a little decant sprayer. And you can get these with certain fragrance stores, but you can also get them from other people like you and me on Facebook and things like that. There's so many other ways to have a fully fleshed out fragrance collection, that was hard to say, without having to break the bank mega epically. You don't need hundreds of fragrances, guys, okay? Just keep 100. That's all you need. Just 100 fragrances, guys. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. I know it was a bit long-winded, but you stayed to the end, which is why I love you. Hit that subscribe button if you want some more J-ROYL fragrance action. And that's the end of the video, guys. Bye!